This concept made clear is about concept. So really we're talking about the concept of concept. So this particular video then is kind of an important one for being able to think about the whole project of what we're doing when we're trying to make our concepts be more clear. So it's always a great moment in teaching when we're going through the process of human knowing, where we introduce the term concept, and the students notice for the first time its etymology and the importance of its etymology. It's always great to look at the kind of the history of a word. So concept is from the past participle of the word in Latin that means to conceive. So the concept is something that has been conceived. And so there's this really neat, rich analogy between the conception of a living thing in the womb of its mother, in the conception of reality in the mind of a knower. And when a mother conceives a child, well, there's a new being in that mother. It's a new being of whatever kind the mother is. In this case, when the knower conceives something, there's a kind of new being in the mind of the one knowing. And it's a being of the kind of whatever it is out there in reality that is being conceived right now. So the definition we're going to use for concept is a likeness formed and existing in the mind of some way of being. Again, a likeness formed and existing in the mind of some way of being. Remember, we'll always first give a definition, give a brief explanation, and then make a quick application. So a little explanation here. Let's just take an example of triangle. Triangle is a way of being. There's the triangular, we could say, way of being. When I begin to grasp that way of being, we can say I conceive that way of being in my mind. So now there is a concept in my mind when I have conceived, when I am conceiving that way of being. So think about how there'll be different intelligible notes in my mental conception of the way of being, that is the triangular way of being. 3, a plane figure. What is a line? What is an angle? All these things are kind of built together. Note how ultimately other concepts are going to be used in building up more complex concepts. So here we begin to see there's a rich content of your concept that is capturing the various intelligible aspects of whatever it is in question that we are forming a concept of. The triangular way of being is actually quite straightforward compared to some of the other things that we form concepts of, such as, amazingly, the human way of being. So whether it's rather simple, whether it's complex, we have concepts of the various ways of being out there, the various kinds of things that exist that we are trying to grasp. So here's a few things to know. First of all, going again to the richness of the term, when we conceive something, it actually is a way of having it. It's a way of being more. When you conceive something mentally, you now are something more than you were before. Concepts are not physical images. What's the difference? Physical images are likenesses of things, and we can say in their particularity. Picture a physical image is like a picture or a painting is a likeness of some very individual particular thing. A concept is a kind of likeness or image. It's a presence in me, a likeness in me of that way of being out there, but it's of that thing in a more universal way. It's of that whole way of being. It's not just a likeness of some particular instance, the way a physical image is, but it's a likeness and presence of that whole way of being. Those physical images, by the way, that we mentioned, they are different from concepts They are related to concepts, and we use physical images all the time in thinking about things to help us in forming our concepts and thinking more about them. Later, we'll talk in another video more about those physical images. Concepts are a way of grasping reality. This is the key thing we need to understand about concepts. They are a way of trying to get at being as it is out there. Reality is always the measure because getting at reality is always the goal. So our concepts are better to the extent that they succeed in capturing well the ways of being that are really there. Final point about concepts in our explaining of it is social conditioning affects our concepts. If you think of a couple quick examples today, think of the concepts that people have of something like love or authority, fatherhood, freedom. The concepts in people's minds have been very much affected by the social circumstances in which we are. This can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be a problem. It can be a help if we are in good social circumstances. Well, this feeds nicely into my big application here. If we try to be humble and docile, first of all to reality, that's the key, but then also as a path to being docile and humble to reality, if it could be docile and humble to the great Western tradition of thinking about things, we can be socially conditioned, as it were, by the history of the use of various terms that capture the concepts that have built into them so much insight, so much wisdom of our tradition. This is why often we want to go to definitions that have been passed on to us, ways of conceiving reality that have been built up and refined over generations. So throughout our project, we're going to be, in trying to clarify our concepts, we'll be going to definitions and seeing various insights in the tradition, often of great philosophers, great thinkers, of how we have thought through history about these various ways of being that we're trying to grasp. I close by just noting I consider myself such a beneficiary of this great tradition. When I think of things such as the ones I noted earlier, a notion of authority or freedom or of human nature. Frankly, even the concept of concept that we're talking about here, this has been passed on. Right? These are things that we can learn in our tradition. We are the inheritors of so much that can help us in forming concepts better. And today's was about the concept of concept.